We designed the chips for physical things. We had a few set of constraints. And the first one we said is, okay, we want to make a chip with a key that is non-extractable. So the chip self-generates an identity, a key, and it should never by design be a key that you can extract from it.
This is a Winternet Explorer. Hi, I'm Winny from DSC and this is a Winternet Explorer. Today I'm here with Cameron from Burner.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Good morning. How is your consensus so far?
It's been good. For a bear market consensus, there's been a lot of interesting conversations, a lot of interesting companies. So,
yeah, I feel like the vibes have been surprisingly really high this week.
Yeah.
And I think, I've left a lot more bullish than when I showed up.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Given some of the other conferences this year, which were a bit quieter, I was expecting things to be way different. But, you know, a lot of builders, a lot of people who are really focused on doing interesting stuff in the space. So
yeah, glad you're here. Speaking of people doing interesting stuff, obviously you guys have been doing very interesting things for a while. Talk me through Arx from, the chips to where you are now with Burner.
Yeah, so a few years ago, we founded Arx Research, and the focus was on making secure chips where you could associate physical things on the blockchain. So it looks like an NFC tag, but it's actually way more sophisticated. It has the ability to sign full messages for a smart contract. So normally an NFC chip might just have like a URL associated with it, but these NFC chips below the URL, you have all this functionality where you can sign messages, do transactions, and authenticate the thing. So that was the first product we built. Worked with a lot of different companies to integrate that into lots of cool stuff.
Very familiar with that.
T-shirts, shoes, nails, whole range of interesting things. What we found from that was, we're sort of tied to the NFT boom, and that went through its own life cycle. And as that started to dwindle down a bit, we said, okay, why don't we refocus on financial use cases and financial applications? So at the end of 2024, we launched Burner, which is a low-cost hardware wallet based on the exact same chip tech we'd been working on. Looks like a card, feels like a credit card, easily fits in your wallet, but our focus was on gifting. So normally hardware wallets are like ledgers and Trezors, and the comparison I have is like programming an old school VCR. Like when you pull one out, it's like tricky and hard to use. But with Burner, everything is browser based. So you tap it to your phone, immediately see your balances and stuff. And so, yeah, we launched that at the end of 2024. People started gifting them out to people who've never had crypto before. It was really awesome. But the immediate feedback that we got was, cool, you just gifted me $100 of crypto on my card. Can I go spend it somewhere?
Yeah.
And so it was sort of like obvious after the fact that a normal person would want to spend money, it turns out, not just hodl it forever. So at the end of last year, we announced Terminal, a product designed for accepting crypto payments in person, direct crypto payments, no credit card rails. You tap to pay exactly like you would do with a normal credit card.
Amazing. So Burner's whole pitch is self-custody that doesn't feel like self-custody. And you ship a product that is challenging the norms of how we see the industry and how the industry sees seed phrases. What was the thought process that pushed that?
So part of it was where the tech originated. So when we designed the chips for physical things, we had a few set of constraints. And the first one we said is, okay, we want to make a chip with a key that is non-extractable. So the chip self-generates an identity, a key, and it should never by design be a key that you can extract from it. And so when we ported the technology to Burner, we maintained the same concept because we said, well, although it's possible for us to design this in a way where you can export the keys and import the keys, one of the biggest problems with the wallet space is even if you have a great hardware wallet, if you don't know how the keys were generated or you used them previously, you wrote them down on a piece of paper, you store them on your phone notepad, even if then you import them into your ledger, you have this whole gap in the security. And for a novice user, they wouldn't really perceive that. They'd say, I don't understand. I had 12 words screenshotted in my photos and I put it in my ledger. It should now be secure. And so from the first principles of Burner, we said, okay, let's never expose a seed phrase. It's just a confusing concept. let's have it so that it generates these keys. You never have to think about them. And if you want to back them up, we let you just duplicate one burner to many burners. So sort of like an old school like cassette tape or VHS or something or a DVD, you can copy one burner to 10 burners and put them in backup locations and things like that. So we have a way to back it up, but then also we've abstracted away this very confusing concept of key material numbers, 12 seed phrase word that you have to remember.
From a user experience perspective, I think Burner's doing a really great job with that.
Abstracting away that complexity was one of the biggest things we focused on. And I think it's actually one of the biggest hurdles for the product in terms of taking it seriously. So obviously we called the product Burner, which is both ironic and antithetical to the concept of a hardware wallet.
I love it.
So like you hear about other projects, Ledger, Trezor, other ones that exude security. It's about something you keep safe. And we said, let's invert the model while still using extremely secure chips that are audited and have the same characteristics of these high-end products, but we can actually do it because we've been manufacturing these chips for all sorts of NFT projects at scale at a much lower cost. And so conceptually, the one of the ideas behind the name Burner is harkening back to old burner phones of like, you know, it's a really useful tool, you need it, but you can dispose of it and get another one quickly. And so conceptually with Burner, it's like, yeah, if you have a burner and it's backed up, you can move your funds to another one quickly. You can give it to people. You can use it kind of more cash-like. So that's a good thing. But then the bad thing is people don't realize that it's actually this deeply secure product. They think it's like, oh, like you just put an exposed private key on an NFC card and I can pull it off and like anybody can see it. But that's not actually the case. It lives in the secure element. When you sign a message, does the same thing that happens on a Ledger or Trezor. It requires a PIN code to access. So it has all these layers that make it a full-fledged, highly secure product. And so there's a little bit of user education around that piece, I would say.
I feel like you are the only ones doing cards differently to anyone in the space. Right now, everyone is so focused on getting those credit cards, getting those, there's a slew of them right now. What narrative in this niche would you consider to be like the most overdone?
There's the real stablecoin use cases that are taking off, and then there's the ones that are theoretical, and then there's the reality that most people, you know, in say the United States have not heard of stablecoins. So we have like this conflicting diametric between these two ideas. And so I think the reality of stablecoins is that when you look at something like the stablecoin cards, a lot of projects are pushing them around like financial independence and like you're using your crypto and you're spending your crypto. But of course, the reality of it is they're using these very traditional rails that have been around for decades. And it doesn't do anything in terms of sort of the more cypherpunk values of crypto, of like spending your money directly, using it like cash. Like you still fall into the case of like Visa and MasterCard can decline your purchases. You can be debanked depending on your jurisdiction. A lot of merchants can't use their services because they can't KYB. So you still have all these traditional aspects of control from the card networks, but then everybody's like put this new shiny crypto badge on it and it's like, oh, but you're spending crypto. So it's definitely a little bit deceptive there in terms of like the reality versus what's happening. And I'd say the other interesting thing is a lot of people don't realize that a lot of the brands pushing the cards, the people running the program specifically push this narrative of like, crypto future, whatever. But the irony is they're making most of their money off of the cards because it's the forced interchange fee, which is paid by the merchants. So a lot of these projects have now discovered this new source of revenue by extracting it out of the merchants versus, you know, being an authentic go spend your crypto directly with merchants.
Is there any project right now that you feel is doing it true to the mission of, you know, the cypherpunk mission, or do you feel like everyone is very much?
That's been a challenge there.
The tap to pay
Yeah.
market is. The question I've been asked for the last 2 years is, when can I pay with my nail?
Yes.
Brother in Christ, if I could do it, it would have been done.
Yeah.
But I do think when building a product like this, when you're doing something physical, there's a lot of great things that can come out of it. And one of those things is I love the user stories of when people have told you the moments that they've used your product What has been one of your favorite ones that a user has told you about how they use Burner?
So there's the obvious ones of where people are excited to gift them, but then there's sort of non-obvious ones where there's been multiple cases of people who've used them as conference badges. We have this little white space on the card here, and it is designed like if you want to give it to somebody, you can write their name or a little message like that. But it turns out that it actually is really useful as a conference badge that has a more interesting take to it. Multiple groups have discovered that you can punch a hole in exactly the right space away from the antenna and then put a lanyard through it. And then so it's just like very creative, interesting case. And then after the fact, the person has this usable tool after the conference that's not just their identity, but you can drop tokens on it and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, that's like not at all what we designed the product for, but it's a really fun one.
That is a really fun use case and something I wouldn't expect, but it seems so obvious. I mean, with DSC, we're using it as our membership card. Has any brand come to you with an idea for something you wouldn't expect to be able to do with it, but you're like, oh wait, this is something you could try?
I can definitely reference a lot of DSC stuff, which has been very creative in terms of like the interesting approaches there. Last year at Consensus, they did this blockchain video booth, which was harkening back to Blockbuster. And it was somewhat mysterious because people didn't really understand where did this come from, what it was, but it was just pure nostalgia. And we were able to make cards that looked very similar to the old Blockbuster membership cards.
Those were sick.
And so like, in terms of the application there, like, yeah, we've done a lot of branded burners for a lot of projects. They're really great handouts. We've done different form factors, you know, we can do wristbands and other things like that. But that one from an aesthetic perspective really like pulled on a lot of strings, and it felt different for a lot of people than just another piece of conference swag or a product. And so the interesting thing, I guess, why I find that one was so different is you can get like an etched ledger or Trezor and a product like that. But with Burner, because it's the card form factor, we can transform it into something which really deeply integrates with the brand and what they're trying to do. And it's funny because in some ways, like, cards are anachronistic. Like, obviously tap to pay and all those things means that like we're moving away from cards. And so when one really stands out to you, it's like, oh, like, what is this? What do I do with this? And it gives you a deeper thought. And so I think a lot of people, when they first saw the cards, are like, oh, it's a cool little plastic card. They didn't realize once you tapped your phone, it actually empowered this whole next level of interactions. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the favorite ones to date that I've seen.
That one was very cool. I think that was my first interaction with DSC. And then obviously I was like, oh my gosh, it's the banner cards. That was really exciting to see last year at Consensus. Speaking of IRL, everyone is using the cards. What has been the biggest bit of feedback that you've received that you hadn't thought of? So yeah, what has been the biggest bit of user feedback that made you really think about it?
The consistent basic feedback. You can get so deep into something, you're like, I know how to tap a card on my phone, but a lot of people have never done that before. They've done tap to pay, but what they don't really understand is that tap to pay, the terminal is powered, and so the signal is much stronger, and your phone is like ready to deal with that. Versus with NFC tags, it's just all over the place. Like, phone support on Androids has been around for a long time, but some Androids are terrible. Some you don't know where the antenna is. Apple begrudgingly added NFC support slowly over time. Like, you have this series of things where it's like that as the core user interaction is really tricky to improve. And it's one of the funny things where we continuously remind ourselves, like, when we have documentation and stuff, we have to start from like the very beginner level of like, okay, like, can they get past the tap? It's sort of like with a computer, like, did you turn it off and on again? But like, if they can't get past the tap, then everything else is gonna be more difficult. And so that, I would say, is one of the trickiest parts of user feedback. But then the other half becomes around like, especially around the gift use case of like, what do I do with this next? So you've given it to someone and they're like, they've started their crypto journey. What do they do next? And it's funny because it depends on where the market cycle is. When the market's going up, they're like, oh, like, I have a token, I have ETH. And it's like, they actually start to like engage with it more. But if the market's going down, they're like, oh, okay, it's like, you gave me, I don't know, something like a savings bond. Like, it's cool, but I might set it aside because I have no active use for it right now.
Yeah.
And that's somewhat intentional by design, you know, especially with our Bitcoin product. The idea of holding the Bitcoin and then rediscovering after 5 years, it's like, oh, whoa, it's worth like 10 times as much or something is definitely part of the product. But then that's where we really started to think deeper around, okay, stablecoins are here to stay. Why don't we extend it into this payment use case? Because that's just the natural extension of what people feel like they want to do. And even in the case of where you've held Bitcoin and it's gone up for years, you will still want to spend it. And so, of course, we can build in off-ramps and things like that. But I think those are still not intuitive. I think the intuitive thing is like, okay, I have this. Let me just go use it at the coffee shop or whatever it is. Buy some piece of art or a computer. You know, people want to spend money versus just sit on top of it.
What do you think the next, 12 to 24 months for stablecoins and for Burner are going to look like?
I think stablecoins are going to continue their inexorable march of adoption. And I think that we've already seen obviously massive adoption in other markets. So that will just continue. I think the question is on the domestic side, do people adopt stablecoins? And in developed markets, you look at Europe, like will those markets adopt stablecoins? And then I think that's where on the 12-month time frame, we'll start to see more of that occur. On the 24-month time frame, yes. But there's still a lot of moving parts, especially on the regulatory side around this whole Clarity Act and whether, by the time this airs, we'll probably have an answer in terms of stablecoin yields and how they get paid out. And that will really strongly shape the use case, because if all of a sudden you can't pay out the stablecoin yield, I think it'll strongly support cash use cases where you're spending it and you're not holding on to it. If there is some provision for yield, but in an obtuse way, stablecoins will likely be shaped into that form. So rather than today, I think a lot of people use them as a savings product. I think people will use them as a rewards product, and that seems to likely be the case. And so I think there's going to be really interesting emerging cases where stablecoins are powering Web 2 looking products from the back end. And part of this is not only self-custody solutions we're building with Burner, but other self-custody solutions where you can use a passkey and SMS login, things like Privy and Turnkey and things like that, are really going to empower this whole generation of stablecoin at the back, neobank fintech at the front. So we'll see more of it. The question is, and my biggest question, I don't have an answer for this, is how many Americans or Europeans are aware that there's a stablecoin? Like, how exposed to it are they? And on the 24-month time frame, it might still be very little, but we'll have to see. Yeah.
Well, Cameron, thank you so much for joining me. I know it's been such a busy week here at Consensus.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited for all that DSC is going to be coming out with and collaborating with Burner.
Let's get it. Let's go.
Nice.
Should I show a little lag?
No.